All right, so we are going through the Imitation of Christ, one of the two books that Vivekananda carried with him everywhere on his wanderings as a monk in India. And we're on chapter 4 tonight. And there was a bit here yet last week that I couldn't find the exact verse in looking at it, but he was talking about to plan what you're doing in your mind before you do it, before you manifest it externally, to prevent yourself, from evil or something along those lines. And I didn't like that idea of planning and was kind of wrestling with it. And I said that I would think about it for a while and kind of come up with a better answer than what I was thinking of last week. And I'm pretty sure in the middle of the night, actually, that same night, in the middle of the night, I woke up with it on my mind, and it kind of resolved that he's talking about, the things, if you're going to do something as an act of will, as a doership, that it's good to run it through in the mind and sort out where it's coming from. How much of it is ego? How much of it is love? How much of it is what's the why going on inside when you're planning on doing something? And if it's ego driven or name and fame driven or pleasure driven, then you could reconsider it. If it's, especially if it's I guess anything, but if it's a spiritual action, just be discerning when you're making plans, to look within you to see what is the seed of that plan. Where is the need for a plan coming from? Make sure that it's not a resistance of the moment, or that it's something that's acceptable to you, in your spiritual eye, your spiritual being. All right, so now we're on chapter 4 on being prudent in what we accept and what we do. It says, it is not good to be taken in by every word or impulse that comes our way, but consider the thing prudently and thoughtfully in order not to offend God. Because we are frail, we are always ready to believe the worst people. Those who seek perfection realize that human nature is weak and prone to spread the evil word. Yeah, so that's very clear. Don't accept everything that you hear. And don't even accept everything that you think. Be discerning always. And in spiritual life, if it's a matter of finding a truth or whether of knowing what to do, we've really got three things that should always be in agreement. It should agree with the words of your guru, it should agree with your own experience, and it should agree with the scriptures. So if you aren't sure about how to do something or what to do something, or if you should do something, those three sources should be consulted for deciding whether something is dharmic for you or not. And this idea, human nature, again, we're going to kind of replace that word human nature with egoistic nature, or the nature of the ego mind. That's when Christians talk that way. We've talked about this quite a bit. We'll probably have to keep making this point quite often, because Christians count human nature post-fall, when Adam and Eve had already eaten the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. They consider that to be human nature. But human nature is divine, because Adam and Eve weren't created fallen. They were created perfectly and lived in perfect harmony with only the divine will in paradise, in the Garden of Eden. And so our nature is not frail. Our nature is not sinful. Our nature is not tending toward wrongdoing. Our nature is divine. Our nature is always divine and is not soiled by action. But the egoic nature, the sense of the personal I, that has, we can say, evil tendencies. It likes to gossip. It likes to be praised. It likes to be seen. It likes to be right. And so that egoistic nature is troublesome indeed. And so for most of our lives, We've lived in that egoistic nature, and so that's what he's talking about. But it's important to know that your nature is not that, because otherwise you do something wrong and you're like, oh well, that's just my nature. You know? And it just seems sort of like, oh well, that explains it. That's why it's that way. And we don't actually see it properly. That the reason wrongdoing hurts us, the reason that it's not pleasant for us, in its when you look at the whole process of it, is because it is against our nature. If you do something that's against love, it hurts you. If you do something that is ununiversal or selfish, it hurts. And so that shows us that our nature is divine. If our nature was fallen, then it really wouldn't bother us. We'd have a fight with our friend and we wouldn't care. You know, but things that are counter to love, we find very uncomfortable. So this is how we know that our nature is divine, and that's how we know that our nature is Satchitananda. You know, the sages, by carefully looking at ourselves, carefully looking at the divine within us, have found that those three things are present in us and are desired by us in truth, and are actually the things that we're looking for, even in our vices. You know, we're looking for the qualities of love through vices because we can't find perfect love through the senses. You know, and so we're looking for union, you know, through relationships and friendships and one stuff, because we can't have oneness through the senses. And so all of our vices are actually longings for God being expressed through the senses, through ignorance. We're trying to recreate our nature in the finite, and it's an impossible task since we are an infinite being. We can't recreate it in the world, of the senses. And so, you know, that's why the sages really emphasize that notion, to remember always that everything is temporary, that everything is constantly changing, because that's the easiest way to see that this world is unreal. And it's the easiest way to see that we are not to be defined by this world, or any particular aspect of it, that we are the whole and the complete. So he says, it is wise, therefore, to act slowly. Oh my gosh, if you lived with Swami Prabhupada, you would know exactly what this scripture is saying. It is wise, therefore, to act slowly, not to trust entirely our own opinions, or to accept every tale and quickly pass it along to the next one. You know, the Swami would always wait for a sure answer from within about anything. And he was not bound by the necessities of the world outside at all. So like if you had a question about something, you know, about a program that was coming up, that program could be 3 days away and you could be harried beyond words trying to get things finished. And you would just need a quick answer from Swami, you know, should it be this way or that way? And you would ask him and he'd say, oh, let us see. He would never give you an answer on the first asking, you know, and sometimes the deadline would come and go and he still will not have given an answer, and you're late and waiting for that answer. And then eventually he would say, yes, let us do so, let us do that. And then he would want it immediately. So this idea of not giving hurried answers, but actually sitting and thinking and contemplating actions is very important. You see it in Swami Brahmananda too, in his writings. You know, that whenever he was asked a question, he would always say, "Oh, let me think on that. Let me go to the mother on that." That makes, you know, and he would go into his practice to get an answer, and not to entirely depend on your own opinion. You see, like it says here, it's like, don't just because you think it's a good idea, just think you think it's the best way or the right way. That's not the whole story. That's just an opinion. And opinions are always formed by what? By egoism. And so if you're a person, inclined to follow your own opinions exclusively, then you've got a great teacher in your ego. Your ego is forging the way wherever it's going. Who knows where it's going? Seek advice from a wise person of good conscience and be instructed by that person rather than to follow your own way. Right? So this is the nature of the guru. This is one of the reasons we have gurus, is to find somebody that's outside of the control of our ego, outside of the opinions of our ego, so that we can have somebody who's looking at us with more objectivity than what we can muster being in the middle of ourselves. So seek from a wise person, and of course, without saying it, go to Mother, go to the divine, go to God, go to God to get your approval. And we talked about how to do that. Have that conversation with Mother in your mind. Present your prayer through your prayer or through your meditation. Present your question, and then just be silent until the answer arises from within, until you know what is right to do. A good life will make you wise in the ways of God and will broaden your experience. If you are humble and submissive to God's will, you will have peace in all you do. And why is that? Because God's will and your true will are the same. Your will without your ignorance is the same as the divine will. With ignorance, that's where all of our vices come in, what we were just talking about moments ago, that you long for your nature. And so you go looking for it in the world of change. You can't find it there. So you try to create it there. And the things that try to create the nature of your divine nature through the world, through the senses in particular, through the mind and the senses, cause us to be selfish because we're identified with a particular. We're identified with a small self, a single mind and a single body. And so the interests coming from the ego are the interests of a single body and a single mind. And it is often, or almost always, at the expense of the whole. Right? So this is how we know. And if you are humble and submissive to this divine will, and that divine will, like we said, it's when you see your own will with clarity, without ignorance, that is divine will. I like to explain it that way because the avatar will have a will, but God would not have a will. There's no point in God having a will. God is, and there's nothing opposing him. There's nothing pushing against him. So if he wants something, if he has a will, boom, it is. So this moment as it is God's will. Right? And that's why we have this practice of non-resistance. That's why we have this practice of accepting the moment as perfect, because this moment is a direct manifestation of the will of God. God does not live in time, so he doesn't want something in the future. God is, and we create the past and the future from this isness, but God is outside time. God is not watching a linear show in front of him. He is the eternal now. And so if we are accepting this will, if we're not resisting this divine will, this isness, this what is, then what he says here is absolutely true. You will have peace in all that you do, because you will be in harmony with your divine nature. And to be in harmony with your divine nature is to have inner peace, to have a clear conscience, to be free. Well, that was a short chapter. Chapter 5, on the reading of Holy Scripture. It is truth that must be sought in Holy Scripture, not beauty of expression. It should be read with the same spirit in which it was written. We must seek the good of our soul rather than literary style, and just as gladly read simple and devout books as those of deep and subtle learning. Be concerned only with the pure truth in what you read, and not with the greatness or lack of learning of the author. Think more of what is said than of the one who said it. Okay. All right, that is a way of doing it for sure. Uh, yeah, I'm a little bit more cautious than that, in that I like to know. So I mean, if it's a no, if it's a known author, if it's a monk or an avatar, no, like not avatars don't write much, it seems, but like Vivekananda, his writings, if it's a known person like that, I accept them quite easily and read them quite easily. But I'm pretty careful about just picking up anybody's book and reading it, because that's stuff that's going into your psyche. That's stuff that's going into you. It's one of the things you're eating. And just like I won't just eat anything, I try and eat healthy things. It's the same with reading and studying. All scripture is safe. All scripture is worthy of reading. Hebrews, the book of Hebrews in the New Testament says all scripture is helpful and for teaching and training in righteousness. And so all scripture is great. And then things written by noble people are great. Um, you know, but other things, you can read them. We're not forbidden to read anything. But if you're reading something from someone who might not have a clear conscience or might not have a noble character, then read it with a certain grain of salt. Read it and have a little holding tank before you accept what it says. Kind of check it out. Is this in concurrence with my guru and my scriptures and my own experience? All right. We must seek the good of our soul rather than the literary style, quite clearly, and just as gladly read simple and devout books as those of deep and subtle learning. Be concerned only with the pure truth in what you read, and not with the greatness or lack of learning of the author. Think more of what is said than of the one who said it. Humans soon pass away. The truth of the Lord remains forever. Through the scripture, God speaks to us in many ways, regardless of those he uses as instruments. Too often we are led by curiosity to read Holy Scripture and want to understand and argue passages we should simply pass over. If you wish to profit by the reading of Scripture, then do so with humility, simplicity, and faith, and never try to acquire a reputation for being a scholar. Inquire, and then listen meekly to what the saints tell you. Do not be critical of the sayings of the ancient fathers, for they were not written without reason. Okay? And so he's saying, don't be critical of the ancient fathers. And this is what we were saying. If it's a known writer, if it's a saint, if it's a monk, if it's a swami, if it's I don't know, anybody along those lines, then yes, read it and don't be critical of it. Take it in. It's time worn. It's time tested, and the life and conscience of the person who wrote it was good and trustworthy. My goodness, breezing through chapters tonight. Chapter 6, concerning inordinate affections. When people desire anything to an excessive degree, they immediately lose their peace of soul. Yeah, desires are the only thing that prevent peace, inner peace. Desires are the opposite of non-resistance. Desires are they're delusions. They're looking at the moment from a different perspective than that of the self. When you look at the moment from the body, the moment's never going to be perfect for the body. The body's always going to want to shift in its chair. It's always going to be too hot, too cold, too tired. And the same thing from looking at the moment through the mind. The mind's going to have its moods and its reasons and its whatnots. So the moment is never seen perfectly through the body or through the mind, but the moment is always perceived perfectly from the perspective of yourself, the divine self, your highest nature. That's where we want to dwell, and that's how we want to see the world, because from that perspective, our inner peace is always maintained. If you're looking through the body, that peace isn't going to be maintained because there's going to be discomforts and needs and wants. And if you're looking through the mind, for the same, The mind and the body are always changing. You can't stand on something that's always changing. When Jesus gave that lesson about the wise man building his house on the rock and the foolish man building his house on the sand, that's exactly what he's talking about. The sand is the changing, the world of change. So if you build your life on the desires of body and mind, then your house is going to come crashing down. It's not going to stand firm because you have no foundation. But to build the house on the rock is to build the house on the unchanging self, your divine nature, that which is beyond body and mind. And those principles we learn from our teacher, from the scriptures, and from paying close attention to life. And that is when we maintain and keep that peace of soul. It's not going to crumble. It's not going to fall. It's going to last. The proud and avaricious are always perturbed, while the humble and poor in spirit live in peace and contentment. Exactly, because the proud has their self-opinion built on egoism. And egoism is by nature insecure. And so they're very troubled when people speak against them. They're very troubled when the social circumstances don't honor them properly, don't recognize their greatness. And so in that, there's always a shaking of peace, a need to grab or hold on tightly to something that is moving and changing. The humble and the poor in spirit live in peace and contentment. The person is just living in the present, just loving, just serving, not caring, like Brother Lawrence, person content to just be the cook in the kitchen, but is there cooking with the divine, enjoying his inner bliss, being kind in everyone and everything that he sees because the reflection of his beloved is there. That person is always in a state of peace and contentment, always fulfilled, never stressed out or angered, or if they're angered, it's a short-lived anger. Those who are not mortified are easily overcome by small temptations. Mortified, those who aren't practiced, in paying attention, those who don't have a good power of discernment within. We're easily overcome by temptations because the body has a desire, and because we haven't done our inner work of noting our separation from body, then we still identify with the body, and so we think that what the body wants is what we want. And so instead of saying, oh, the body is tired, we say, I'm tired, and if I'm tired, I have to do something about it. If the body's tired, you've got a choice. And so that's what he means by that word mortified, that person who's not well practiced in discerning their nature and in knowing the place of the body, knowing the place of the mind, and then consequently knowing where the desire belongs. The practice that I use for that is the three things you can say about yourself. I'm loving, I exist, I'm wise. Those are the only three things that you can say about I that are true. Everything else you say is not true. It's a false identity. When you say I'm angry, no, you're not angry. The mind is angry. I'm hungry. No, that's not one of the three things. The body is hungry. And so it's a very good practice. It might be a little odd in some circumstances to always name the proper owner of your desires, so that you don't get confused into thinking they're yours. So if that stomach growls, say, oh, look, the body is hungry. If you wake up in the morning, you're feeling depressed and you don't want to get out of bed, don't say I'm depressed, because that ties you to the millstone of depression for the rest of the day. Say, oh, look, I'm looking through a depressed mind at the moment. And that gives you choice, right? So always be sure to assign the desire to the proper entity. Do not own desires that are not yours, and you will have peace. But if you take the desires of body and mind as your own, you're going to be a very busy slave. Because as soon as one desire is filled, there's going to be another one. And you're lucky if you only get one at a time. It is difficult for people to withdraw themselves from worldly desires when their spirits are still weak and inclined to the things of the sense. Yes, which is a generalization of what we just said. You know, if you have not withdrawn yourselves from worldly desires, which basically means withdraw your identity of self from the body mind, from the changing, right? So worldly desires are those things that are desires for the changing. They can't be fulfilling. They won't last. They're not stable, and they won't do anything but feed more desire, right? That's why they say, you know, by fulfilling desires, you're throwing gas on the fire. You know, and if I were in private conversation right now, I could give you encyclopedias full of experiential truth that would assure you that any desire that involves the senses or the mind cannot be fulfilled. And if you go after it, it's simply going to provide a memory that, again, is going to bother you for more in the future. So that's all that fulfilling your desires in this world can do. That's the only thing they give you is a memory. And that memory will nag you because it will tell you again and again, look, you could have this. You could have this. You know, and then you have to look at it and say, look, I had that. And why am I sitting here having to do it again? If it was everything I needed and fulfilled me, why are you bothering me? Let me be. While in this state, right, in the state of being confused about identity, this state of being confused with body mind, their hearts are heavy when they try to detach themselves, and they are quickly angered by those who oppose them. Right? So when they try to detach themselves, their hearts are heavy. Why? Because they think it's their desire. You think it's your desire. I want a piece of, German tort. And they're like, oh, there's no German tort today. Oh, man. Oh, I was so looking forward to that. You see? That's the natural response when you think it was your desire, but it wasn't your desire. That was just a memory of the mind playing before itself and creating a longing for chocolate cake or for German tort. So your heart gets heavy. That's the first sign of attachment. The second, you are quickly angered. Why? Because the Gita says what? What causes anger? The thwarting of desire. When you don't get what you want, you're going to be angered. So he's saying here that if you try and detach yourselves, from that in mid war, after you haven't been paying attention to the mind and you didn't see the first spark of chocolate cake come up into the mind, and you didn't catch it before it brought in all of its related thoughts, and you've created a state of hunger for cake that you're depending on. If you haven't been watching that whole time, and then suddenly in the midst of it, when you can't have chocolate cake, then you start trying to discern, then you start trying to discriminate, forget it. Don't forget it. Do it even then. You probably won't be successful because you've waited too long. But at least if you start the practice at that point, maybe you can start becoming aware so that you see the triggers before they lead you that far into the cave, before you get that far in. So while in this state, their hearts are heavy when they try to detach themselves, and they are quickly angered by those who oppose them, right? Anybody who's in the way of your desire, you're going to be pretty upset with them. 2, if they give in to themselves, then they suffer remorse of conscience because they have yielded to temptation and do not find the peace of mind that they desired. Yes, okay, so here there's a couple of things hidden in here. If you give in to themselves means if you do not know who you are and your identity includes body mind, then that's the themself that they're referring to right now. They're talking about a deluded person who is identified with body mind and has accepted those desires as being their own, and you give in to them, then you're going to suffer remorse. Why? Because fulfilled desire will still leave you with desire. You won't be sated, And if you are sated, it won't be long before you're not sated, before you're not filled. And you look at what you did and you see that it was a compromise of your divine spirit, that it was a compromise of the holiness, your sacredness. You behaved in a way that was unbecoming of the divine. And so your conscience pricks you. And that is an awesome thing, because what is conscience? Conscience is your true nature. Conscience is your higher self. And that higher self is the one that's always keeping its fingers crossed, like Holy Mother with Radu in the treasury. You know, when the king offered them whatever they wanted, and Holy Mother said, "No, I don't need anything." And Radu was like, "Well, actually," and Mother, you know, it says that Mother inside was like sitting at the edge of her seat, like, "No, Radu, what are you doing?" And then Radu asks, she's literally looking at this room full of golden treasures. And she says, "Yes, I need something." And Mother's freaking out. And then Radu says, "Do you have a pencil?" "I need a pencil." So that's how you know you're growing. You're standing in the middle of the room of treasure and somebody asks you what you want. If you're perfect, you say, "No, thank you, I don't need anything." If you're a spiritual seeker and you're moving forward, you might need a pencil. So if they give in to themselves, then they suffer remorse of conscience, right? Because they violated their divine nature. Because they have yielded to temptation and do not find the peace of mind they desired. This is the other piece. The peace of mind is what we're looking for. You know, the peace of mind is a knowledge of self. That's the only place that peace of mind comes from. Peace of mind only comes by knowing that you are of the divine will, that this moment is perfect, that all is well, you know, that your nature is a perfect love, a love that's completely unconditioned, that you're covered in a vast grace that's more than you could ever imagine, that you are never going to die, that you've never been born, that nothing has ever touched you, nothing has ever wetted you, burned you, any of those things, that you have been in an eternal state of peace somewhere in here. But because you're living here, you're not experiencing it. If you could live here, then you'll experience it. And that's why we're trying to find the discipline to silence the mind and to pull our identity out of it and to become the witness that we've always been. We find peace only by resisting our passions, not by giving in to them. Absolutely. Right? Because you have to break that desire. You have to break that identity with the body in order to overcome the passions. Right? And that's the only way for this inner peace. Because it is your body that determines your passions, right? This is a weird thing, but since Mother's put it in my mind, by our agreement, I'm bound to mention it. But there was one time when I was, oh goodness gracious. Okay, here it comes. So there was a time when I was walking in Olima, and I was walking by the cow pasture, right? And it was a time where I had a lot of there were some passions in my mind that I was struggling with during that time. And I was walking by this cow pasture and I saw this cow out there doing cow things. And I thought, you know, that cow is naked. That cow's naked, has no clothes on. Why don't I feel desire for that? You know, it's like, why is it? If I was a cow, I would. Or if I was a bull, I would, right? That desire would be there. And I would understand and that. But then that is what helped me realize, see, that is why it's important that we know who we are. Because if you knew who you were, your only desire would be for the divine, for the beloved. It wouldn't be for anything else. But because you think that you're this body and this kind of body and this age of body and this condition of body, then it's attracted to other, well, it can be attracted to a lot of things, but certainly it'll be attracted to other bodies. And so the way out is through your nature, through knowing who you are. That's why the fundamental question that we're trying to answer in spiritual life is, who am I? What am I? so that we know what we want, so that we know what is necessary. Until we know who we are, we're shooting in the dark. We have no idea. We have no idea what we're going after. But even in this wrongdoing, okay, even in this state of delusion, this is an important verse. We find our peace only by resisting passions, by overcoming them, not by giving in to them. It's not helpful to give in to your passions. You can do it. The only way that it's helpful, and this is a dangerous thing, but it is possible, and Thakur did it. The only thing, the only way that this is acceptable to give in to your passions is as a study. And you better be doggone careful that you really are studying and not just making an excuse to enjoy your passions, whatever they might be. Thakur had Mathur fill a room with sweets, and he locked himself in there so that he could see what the nature of that was. And he came out and got sick from eating all those sweets. And he didn't have to do it again because he saw, oh, that's the nature of sweets. If I eat the sweets that I desire, I'll get sick. So the fruit of eating sweets is not what I'm looking for. And then he did the shawl and the hubble bubble thing too, remember? And he found out that that caused pride. And boy, you can know that if an avatar, if someone as pure as a Jesus or a Ramakrishna feels arrogance or feels pride, you know that that hurts. You know that that hurt him inside because of that purity. And so that's why he threw it on the ground, stomped down it, and wanted to set fire to it. That's where you find your zeal inside, knowing your nature, And I think that that's why was it Bhagavati who came in and stung him like a scorpion. That's my understanding of the story. Is the reason that he in that part of the play felt the sting of a scorpion. I think he was demonstrating to Bhagavati what her vice was doing to her own soul. Because we become unconscious on purpose because our desires hurt our soul. We feel that inner pain, that pain of conscience that he just mentioned earlier above. We feel that pain of conscience, but if we continue to pursue our desires, we just squelch it and we just start distracting ourselves. We start engaging in busy things, getting things done, watching movies, reading, enjoyable books and all kinds of manner of distractions. Because unfortunately, that's the only peace that the world can offer you is distraction. The world cannot offer you anything that fixes your nature. The world can only offer you distraction. And so the divine within, going within, finding your nature, finding out who you are, what you are, that solves your problems. That fixes them. The world just puts them off, just gets you distracted for a while. Peace is in the heart of the devout and fervent, not in those who are carnal and give themselves to outward things. Okay, not a judgment toward them. It's just if you're looking for peace, don't go looking for things outwardly. Don't go out into the world to find your contentment because it won't work. It just, oh God, I can tell you. Holy Toledo, I did not leave a rock unturned in the world and did all manner of things. And I tell you, I came quite close to self-destruction in the face of that, in the face of my desperation. I just couldn't imagine why go on living. Because of the efforts I was making to stay entertained, to stay pleased, to feed all of my desires. My entire paycheck was going and all of my time was going. And, I was up way too late every single night, in pursuit of those things. And, I remember one time, one of the moments that I had where something slipped inside, where something betrayed some truth, was I was walking home from a club, from the bar actually, and two of my friends were walking up the hill with me, and we were talking, and I said something. I don't even remember what I said. But I remember my friends stopped walking and I kept going, and then I stopped, like, where'd they go? And I turned around and they were just looking at me like, their mouths were agape. And they just said, Vance, that was the most bitter thing I have ever heard somebody say, you know. And if I could remember what I said, I'd share it, but I don't remember what it was. But, when they stopped and just looked at me and said that, I just was like, yeah. And I realized that that's where life had led me. That at that point in my life, I was so bitter because I had worked so hard to get everything that I wanted. And all I felt was just emptiness, just no purpose. I felt like a parasite. I thought, God, is this really, am I on this earth just sucking the life out of the earth for pleasure? Just spending the earth for desire. And I just, that my divine nature in there, even though I didn't know of it, was exerting itself and saying, you are not a parasite. You are not here to suck pleasure from life. There's something more. There's something more, right? And so this is how we must live. And, he gives us two adjectives here, the devout and the fervent, right? Devout means you've got a stronghold. This is what I am. This is what I'm about. And the fervent, they've got that intensity to their practice, that intensity to their search. Not going to be lost. I'm not going to be lost. I'm not going to be fooled. I want the truth and the truth alone. Right? All right, chapter 7. On false confidence and arrogance. It is foolish to put your trust in humans or in any creature for that matter. Right? I'm running through my mind here thinking, how does this work? Because you can't run around not trusting everybody either. It is foolish to put your trust in humans, with expectation, because the humans aren't going to consistently deliver. Our hope is in God. Our trust is in the divine. And to the extent that that person is someone who is manifesting their divine nature, then to that degree, they can be trusted in that sense. So it's foolish to put your trust in humans or in any creature for that matter. Why should you mind serving others or being poor in the eyes of the world, as long as you do it for the love of Jesus Christ, right? And that's that whole idea when Christ in the book of Revelation, people are being judged, and the wicked person says, Jesus says, I was hungry and you did not feed me. I was naked and you did not clothe me. I was thirsty and you did not give me drink. And the wicked person being judged says, God, what? When did I see you hungry? When did I see you naked? And, and Jesus points to he says, in as much as you did it or did not do it for the least of these, you did not do it for me. And so we have to see Christ in everything, and we do that by seeing him in ourselves, by seeing our divine nature in ourselves, finding the presence of God within. Then we will know the God within everybody. Then we will be able to serve the God within everybody, as soon as we learn how to serve the God within ourselves. Put all of your confidence in God, right? Know that there's nothing else to stand on. Right? If you put your confidence in yourself, you're going to be up when you do well. You're going to be down when you fail. So if you've got confidence in yourself, the low self, the smaller self, you have no security, no strength. Right? Your security comes in your divine nature. You are worthwhile as a person, not for what you do, not for what you accomplish, but for what you are. You are a manifestation of God. That image of the beloved is firmly at your center. That is your value. It's intrinsic and inherent and cannot be taken away from you. It is always true, whether you are manifesting it, whether you know it, whether you believe it, doesn't matter. Your value comes from the divine nature within you. So put all of your confidence in that divine nature in God, but do not trust your lower self. He says, do not trust yourself. Well, the self he's talking about there is the small self. Don't trust your desires. Don't trust your opinions. Don't trust your will. Keep that discernment alive. Always be watching in there, because we've got habits of wrong thinking. It's not that we're inherently evil. It's that we've got long-standing bad habits that have made us see the world incorrectly, have made us think the wrong things about ourselves. And so that's why we don't trust that lower self, because we've made a mess of it. In time, if you do the work, if you accept the grace and respond with love to that grace, then that lower self and God come closer and closer to looking alike, looking the same, because you're putting yours aside and God is manifesting through you. Do what you can to please God, and he will reward you well for your goodwill. All right? But don't do it for the reward. It's true. You'll feel better. You'll be happier if you live by the divine will. Do not trust your own cleverness, nor that of any other person. Rather, put your trust in the grace of God. Right? That's what we always say. Put your faith in grace. It is grace that we respond to, and it's that responding to grace that creates saints. Right? So it's not a matter of being a what are they calling them nowadays? Alpha males, because they're detestable people, filled with arrogance, and smug self-righteousness. That's not what we want to be. That's not our nature. That's the reason we don't want to be it, because it's contrary to our nature, and it's impossible. You can't get there that way. You can't become great that way. I remember back in the 90s, when I was in computer science working in that field, and back then it was Larry Ellison and who's the guy who owns Microsoft? What's his name? Bill Gates. There was Larry Anderson and Bill Gates. Oh no, yeah, not Anderson. Wrong name. The guy who owned Oracle. Anyway, the two of them were the two richest men in the world. And it would change from day to day, based on the stock market of who was ahead of who. And I remember one day being at work, sitting there working my computer, and I was just thinking to myself, I was like, I can imagine that really bugs them. That they're to be first one day and then not to be first the next day. It's like, if wealth is your goal and somebody's one day ahead of you and then back, then ahead. So you can see, even being the richest person in the world is not going to be enough, because you're not always going to be the richest person in the world. And so back and forth it goes. So do not put any trust in anything in the senses or in this world. Put your trust on your divine nature, God in you, and put your trust in grace. Find your value in grace. And if you can hold on to that grace, you'll find inspiration, and that inspiration will make you devout and fervent in your quest for the divine. Do not trust in your own cleverness, because there's always going to be somebody else more clever, or that of any other person. Rather, put your trust in the grace of God, who gives aid to the humble, right? But humiliates the presumptuous, right? And that humiliation of the presumptuous is not a malicious humiliation. It's him allowing you to see the foolishness of trusting in your wit. God allowing you to see the foolishness, to learn the foolishness of trusting in the body and mind, right? And so I don't like the idea of God humiliating somebody, because most of the time we think about that from an egoistic perspective, and we would think that God is humiliating somebody to punish them, or to for his own enjoyment in some weird way. No. God is a God of love. God is love itself. And the only reason that love would humiliate you is so that you could break free and not do it again. The only reason the divine would allow you to be humiliated is so that you can learn and transcend and not do it again. So all of those things, always know the heart and nature of this universe is love. And that's where ultimately we find our contentment in the moment. And we're able to see and accept without resistance the moment as it is. And that's why we say that your relationship with this moment is your relationship with God. If you cannot sit in this moment contented, you don't yet know the nature of God. And so, work. Find the perfect moment. All right. Do not boast of riches if you have them, or of your important friends, but glory in God only, from whom all good things come, and who, being the highest good, desires to give us himself. Right. All right. So it's pretty, you can see pretty easily in that, right? Don't glory in rich friends. Why? Because as soon as they find out that you're glorying in them for being rich, they're going to dump you. Right? They're going to dump you, and then what? If you want to see what that's like, go read Star Magazine or The Inquirer. There you can find out how happy all of the rich and famous people are. Glory in God alone. Why? Because all good things come from that divine love. And who, being the highest good, because he is that perfect love itself, he is that perfect wisdom itself, desires to give us himself, which is the whole story, the whole Leela, is God offering us herself and just waiting for us to accept that as everything. Do not boast of beauty of body. Why? Because it melts. It goes away. One car accident can ruin a good face. So don't count on a good face. It can go away. It's temporary. It will go away. And if you're wondering about that, pick up that same Inquirer and look at the plastic surgeries of people desperately trying to hold on to beauty as it melts away, right? Feel that panic and see the suffering that goes with trusting in beauty. Do not boast of a beautiful body, which may be soon disfigured by illness or age. Do not be proud of any talents or skills you possess, for in this way you displease God from whom you have received them. Right? This is one of those things I always found it kind of interesting. That somebody tells you, you sing beautifully. And what does the ego do? The ego totally wants to take responsibility for that. Be like, oh, I have a beautiful voice. I'm a great singer. But in reality, it's like, what did I have to do with that? What did I have to do with that? I was born with this voice. So what? What credit is it to me that you like it or that it's a likable voice? Right? It's the exact same thing with beauty. It's like, why become vain of your beauty? What did you have to do with it? You had absolutely nothing to do with it. What kind of weirdo is going to jump in and take credit for being beautiful? It's just, they're just trying to keep you from being a fool, is all here. These are instructions are for. It's like, don't be a fool. Find your value internally. Find your value in your nature. Find your value in the grace and love of that nature, that divine. Do not consider yourself better than others. I saw a video today of a couple. He was 98 and she was 94. And some YouTuber went up to them and was talking to them. And they'd been married for like 80 years or 77 years or something. And he says to them, or he asked them, what would you consider to be the secret to your relationship? How is it that you've stayed together for 70 plus years? And the woman answered, and she gave such a beautiful answer. She said, well, we both just tried not to think that we knew more than the other. That was like, I was like, wow, that would do it. That would do it. If we could just stop assuming that we are the ones that know best, and we could have the humility to converse and to share and to talk and to arrive at wisdom together. So that's what he says here. Do not consider yourself better than others, for you may be worse in God's sight, which wouldn't matter anyway, because we just don't measure ourselves that way, period. It doesn't matter whether we're worse or better in truth or not. The fact is, there's nothing to be gained but foolishness from thinking yourself better or worse than others. Why? Because we don't value that. That's not where we get our value from. That's not where we get our worth from. Our worth comes from the divine image that is part and parcel of what we are, that is what we are. Do not be proud of your good works, for often what pleases us displeases God, whose judgments differ from the judgment of humans. Whatever goodness or virtue is in you, believe that your neighbor has better qualities. In this way, you will preserve humility. It will not hurt you to consider yourself worse than others, even if this is not really so, but it will hurt greatly if you prefer yourself above another, although that person might be a great sinner. A humble person is a peaceful person, but the hearts of the proud are full of envy and resentment. Envy because they want to be like the people that are better than they are, and resentment because they're angry at the people that are better than they are. So if you draw your sense of self from these things, you won't find peace. And you won't find peace because these things have nothing to do with our nature. They are changing, they are temporary, they are short-lived, and they will die with the body. Vivekananda says the only thing that goes beyond the grave with you is your virtue, because that is what you are. All right, so we'll stop there.